The sky was bruised with the colors of a fading storm when the Mustang first appeared on the ridge. From the porch of the old McCall ranch, 17-year-old Lila McCall froze, her hand tightening around the wooden post. The wind carried the scent of rain and sage, and far across the open plain stood a stallion, chestnut and silver, muscles taut, mane rippling like wildfire. His eyes flashed with a kind of wild defiance that made even the air seem to tremble. "Lord above," murmured her father from behind her. "That's him, the ghost horse of Sage Creek." Lila had heard the stories since she was a child, of a stallion too fast to catch, too proud to break. The ranchers called him Diablo. They said he'd broken fences, stolen mares, and vanished like smoke. No one had ever gotten close enough to touch him, but standing there, Lila didn't see a devil. She saw fear, raw, coiled fear beneath the power. Her father's voice hardened. "I'll get the wranglers ready. If we can catch him, he's worth a fortune." Lila said nothing. She watched the Mustang's ears flick at the sound of the thunder, watched his chest rise with wary breaths. Something in her, something she couldn't name, tightened like a string pulled too far. When her father went inside, she stepped off the porch and crossed the wet grass, her boots sinking into the mud. The stallion lifted his head, nostrils flaring. The wind shifted, carrying her scent. His muscles bunched. "Easy," she whispered, though he was 100 yards away. "It's just me." He snorted and vanished in a blur of motion, galloping toward the horizon, hooves throwing mud and light into the storm. That night, the rain came hard. The wranglers sat around the fire, talking about traps and lassos. Her father drew a rough map on the dirt floor. "He runs the northern ridge," he said. "We'll cut him off near the canyon. By morning, he'll be boxed in." Lila felt a cold twist in her stomach. She'd grown up around horses, had tamed a few herself, but something about the idea of capturing this one felt wrong, like caging the wind. After the others turned in, she sat alone on the porch, wrapped in her blanket. Lightning flickered over the hills, and in that moment, she thought she saw a shape moving through the rain, a flash of silver mane against the darkness. He was watching her. The Mustang stood near the edge of the pasture, silent and still, as if testing her courage. Lila rose slowly, her breath shallow. Every instinct screamed that he would bolt if she moved too fast. She took one step, then another. The wind howled between them, carrying the scent of rain and wild sage. She could feel his heartbeat, or maybe it was her own, echoing in her chest. "Why are you here?" she whispered. The stallion's ears flicked. He pawed the ground once, his muscles tense, eyes bright with fire. Then, something changed. The thunder rolled away, and in the silence that followed, she felt a strange connection, as if the storm itself had paused to listen. And then, as suddenly as he'd come, he turned and disappeared into the night. By morning, the wranglers were gone, riding toward the canyon with ropes and rifles. Her father left her to feed the colts and check the fences, but Lila's mind was far away, following the Mustang's tracks through the wet earth, imagining where he'd run. By noon, she couldn't bear it anymore. She saddled her mare, Juniper, and followed the faint trail north, where the land opened into endless hills and whispering grass. The air was still heavy with the scent of last night's rain. She rode until the sun was low, and then she saw it, the canyon rim, and below it, chaos. Her father and the wranglers had cornered the Mustang in a rocky basin. He was fighting like a creature born of fire, rearing, twisting, snapping ropes like thread. The men shouted, trying to close in. The stallion's eyes rolled white, his chest heaved, nostrils flaring, every movement screaming one word: freedom. "Pa! Stop!" she shouted, riding closer. Her father didn't hear, or didn't care. One of the ropes snapped, and the stallion charged toward the cliff's edge. For a heartbeat, it looked like he'd leap straight into the sky. Lila kicked her mare forward and cut across the basin, shouting again, but this time not to the men, to him. "Wait!" He froze, hooves skidding on the rocks. The wranglers hesitated, afraid to spook him again. The Mustang turned his head toward her, wild eyes meeting hers. His chest rose like a storm trying to break. Lila slid off her horse and stepped forward, boots crunching on gravel. Everyone watched in silence. She could feel the wind pushing against her, testing her resolve. The stallion pawed the ground, torn between fear and fury. Then she said it, softly, steadily, 4 words that came from somewhere deeper than thought. "You're not my enemy." The Mustang's ears flicked. His breathing slowed, just slightly. His gaze softened from fire to something like recognition. For a long, trembling moment, neither of them moved. And then the storm inside him broke, not in rage, but in surrender. He lowered his head, just a fraction, and let her take a step closer. Lila's father whispered hoarsely behind her, "I'll be damned." The girl reached out, hand trembling, until her fingers brushed the stallion's muzzle. Warm, alive, free. And for the first time, the ghost of Sage Creek didn't run. The Mustang's breath was hot against Lila's palm. Every heartbeat between them felt like it could shatter the spell. The men around her stood frozen. No one dared to move, not even her father. Then, as if sensing the weight of their eyes, the stallion pulled back. His muscles rippled, his nostrils flared, and for a terrible second she thought he'd bolt again. But he didn't. Instead, he turned his head slightly, as though listening to something only he could hear, the whisper of the wind, the echo of his herd somewhere beyond the hills. Lila lowered her hand, her voice trembling but calm. "It's all right," she murmured. "You don't have to fight." Her father stepped forward. "Lila, get back. He's dangerous." She glanced at him sharply. "No, Pa. He's scared. There's a difference." The old rancher clenched his jaw. The stallion's tail flicked, his ears twisting toward every sound, the jingle of spurs, the rasp of leather. The wranglers were still gripping their ropes, unsure whether to throw them or drop them. Lila saw it in the Mustang's eyes, the decision forming, the instinct to run. One wrong move, and he'd crush himself against the canyon wall trying to escape. So she did the only thing she could. She took off her gloves, dropped them on the dirt, and slowly, painfully slowly, turned her back to him. The men gasped. It was the oldest lesson her mother had ever taught her before she died. If you want a wild creature to trust you, show it that you're willing to be just as vulnerable. The air between them changed. The stallion's breathing steadied. His ears flicked forward again. He stepped closer, one cautious, soundless step, then another. Lila could hear his hooves pressing into the gravel behind her. She didn't move. She didn't even breathe. And then, warm air brushed her neck, a soft snort. He was close enough that she could feel his heart beating, a deep thunder that seemed to vibrate through her bones. "Easy, boy," she whispered. "It's okay. No one's going to hurt you." Behind her, one of the wranglers muttered, "Well, I'll be damned. She's got him under a spell." Her father, though, said nothing. His weathered face was unreadable. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Lila turned back toward the stallion. His head lowered, and he stood quietly, still trembling, still fierce, but no longer trying to flee. She reached out again, and this time he didn't shy away when her hand touched his mane. "See," she said softly, "you're not alone anymore." They led him back to the ranch by sunset, though led wasn't the right word. He followed Lila, untethered, with a kind of wary curiosity, as if bound by something stronger than rope. Her father walked beside them, shaking his head. "Never seen anything like it," he muttered. "You sure you didn't sprinkle fairy dust on him, girl?" Lila smiled faintly. "No, Pa. Just listened." The Mustang's sides glistened with sweat, but his eyes were calm now, deep, intelligent, still wild. The ranch hands kept their distance, whispering among themselves. To them, he was still Diablo, the uncatchable ghost. To Lila, though, he was something else entirely. When they reached the corral, her father stopped. "We'll stable him here tonight." Tomorrow, we'll see if he can be broken." "Broken?" she echoed sharply. "You can't break him. You'll ruin him." Her father frowned. "He's a horse, Lila, not a saint. If he's gonna be worth anything, he's gotta learn to carry a rider." "He already carries something," she said quietly, "and that's more than most men do." He opened his mouth to argue, then sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. "Fine. You deal with him then. But if he kicks your head off, don't say I didn't warn you." That night, the ranch was still. The sky spread wide and star-soaked over the open plains. Lila sat by the corral fence with a lantern, the Mustang watching her from the shadows. She'd brought him water, but he hadn't touched it. Every so often, he'd toss his head and snort, staring at the moon as if remembering freedom. The sight hurt her more than she wanted to admit. "You hate this place, don't you?" she whispered. "Can't say I blame you. I'd hate it too if someone trapped me just for being strong." The Mustang flicked his tail. His gaze never left her. "You know," she went on, "my ma used to say horses don't just talk with their bodies, they talk with their hearts. You just have to listen to the rhythm of their hooves." For a long while, neither of them moved. Then he took a step forward, hooves crunching softly in the dirt. 1, 2, 3. Pause, almost like a heartbeat or a question. Lila smiled. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I hear you." The next morning, her father came out to the corral with a saddle and a scowl. "He's calm now. Let's see if he stays that way." Lila stepped between them. "He's not ready." "Lila, Pa, please, just give me time." The old man hesitated. "You think you can train him without a rope or a saddle?" "I don't want to train him," she said simply. "I want him to choose." Her father stared at her for a long time, then finally sighed. "You've got until sundown." Lila turned back to the stallion. "Looks like it's just you and me, boy." She opened the gate and stepped inside. No rope, no halter, just her and the Mustang in the open corral. The morning light shimmered across his coat like liquid gold. He watched her every move, muscles tense but curious. Lila circled slowly, keeping her distance, moving with the rhythm of his breath. Whenever he turned toward her, she turned away. When he stepped back, she paused. They moved in a strange, wordless dance, two creatures learning each other's language. After an hour, she saw it, the flicker of understanding. He lowered his head, exhaling through his nostrils in that soft, fluttering sound she knew meant peace. She smiled, tears burning in her eyes. "There you are." Then she did something no one watching could believe. She knelt down, completely still, and waited. The Mustang came to her, step by step, until his shadow covered her. He sniffed her hair, her shoulder, her trembling hands. Then, with a quiet sigh, he rested his muzzle against her chest, right over her heart. The sound that filled the air wasn't just breath, it was trust, fragile and new. Lila whispered to him, voice barely audible, "I'll never cage you. Not ever." The Mustang's ears twitched. A breeze passed through the corral, carrying the scent of sage and dust and something almost sacred. In that moment, Lila knew. She hadn't tamed him. She'd met him halfway, and the earth itself seemed to breathe easier. 3 days passed, and the ranch began to buzz with stories about the girl and the ghost horse. The wranglers who once bragged about breaking wild colts now stood by the fence every morning, quiet, watching. They saw the Mustang, once all fury and lightning, move beside Lila like a shadow. No rope bound him, no saddle touched his back. Yet wherever she went, he followed. Her father said little, but every night when the lanterns were out and the house was still, Lila could hear him pacing in the kitchen, muttering to himself about lost prophets and impossible girls. To her, though, none of it mattered. The Mustang had become her world. She'd named him Ashwind, for the way his mane shimmered like smoke in sunlight, for the way he moved, silent, swift, impossible to hold. He would let her brush his coat now, drink from her hands, even rest his head against her shoulder. But the moment anyone else came near, the fire would return to his eyes. "He trusts you," said her father one morning, watching from the fence. "Not us." That's a problem, Lila. He's got to learn to carry a rider. She stroked the horse's neck, feeling the taut power under his skin. He'll carry one when he's ready. Her father snorted. That's not how training works. She turned to him, fierce and calm. Then maybe it's training that's broken, not him. The ranch was running short on money. Drought had withered the grasslands. Half their herd had been sold off to keep the lights on. Her father's patience was thinning with the rainless weeks. So when a black truck rolled up the dirt road one afternoon, and a man stepped out wearing a silver belt buckle and a smile too sharp to be friendly, Lila knew trouble had found them. Name's Rhett Calloway, the man said, shaking her father's hand. Heard you've got the wild stallion that has been running the canyons these past years. Word travels fast. Her father nodded warily. We caught him, yes. Rhett's eyes gleamed as he spotted Ashwind grazing near the corral. Beautiful creature. I'll pay 10,000 cash. Lila's heart lurched. He's not for sale. Rhett's smile didn't reach his eyes. Didn't ask you, sweetheart. Her father hesitated. 10,000 could save the ranch. It could pay off debts, fix fences, buy feed for winter. He looked between his daughter and the stallion, jaw working like he was chewing on something bitter. Pa? Lila said softly. You can't sell him. You saw what happens when anyone else gets near him. He'll die before he lets someone break him. Rhett laughed. Oh, they all say that. But every horse breaks eventually. Something in Lila snapped. Not him. Her father raised a hand. Enough. Let me think. But Rhett wasn't done. I'm staying in town a few days, he said with a smirk. You change your mind, old man. You know where to find me. He tipped his hat to Lila. And you, Missy, might want to learn the difference between loving a horse and keeping one from his purpose. When he left, the dust he kicked up lingered like poison. That night, the air was thick and heavy, the kind of silence that comes before a storm. The horizon flickered with distant lightning. Lila sat by the corral again, Ashwind standing close beside her. She could feel the tension in the world, the clouds gathering, the land holding its breath. I won't let him take you, she whispered, resting her forehead against his neck. Not while I'm breathing. The horse shifted, muscles quivering as if he understood. The wind rose, carrying the scent of rain and electricity. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. Inside the house, her father argued with the empty air. She could hear his voice, low and pained. I can't lose this place, Maggie, he said, to her mother's ghost, maybe. What am I supposed to do? The thunder answered him. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain came in violent sheets, pounding against the roofs, turning the dirt road into a river of mud. Lila woke to the sound of splintering wood. She threw open her door and froze. The corral fence was down. Lightning flashed, revealing Ashwind rearing in panic, eyes wild, hooves striking the air. A fallen branch had shattered the gate, and the rest of the herd was scattering in the chaos. Pa! She screamed. Her father burst from the barn, grabbing a lantern. Get back inside! But she was already running toward the storm. The wind tore at her hair, the rain slicing like glass. Ashwind! She cried, her voice nearly swallowed by the thunder. The Mustang whirled toward her, trapped between flight and fear. Lightning split the sky, and for an instant, he was nothing but fire and motion. Then, another sound cut through the rain. A truck engine. Headlights flared across the field. Rhett Calloway. He'd come back, maybe smelling opportunity. Lila saw him jump from the cab, rope in hand, shouting over the storm. Her father shouted something she couldn't hear. The world was chaos, mud, rain, hooves, light. Ashwind reared, screaming his defiance. The rope flew through the air. No! Lila dove between them. The rope caught her shoulder, snapping tight. Pain burned through her arm. Ashwind bolted sideways, kicking up mud and lightning in his wake. The rope snapped free, slashing Rhett's face as it went. Girl's gone mad! Rhett shouted, stumbling back. Her father grabbed him, shoving him toward the truck. Get off my land! Rhett's eyes blazed, but something in her father's stance, old strength, born of storms and years, made him back off. The truck spun in the mud and vanished into the rain. Lila fell to her knees, gasping, her arm bleeding where the rope had burned her skin. Ashwin stood a few feet away, trembling, his eyes reflecting the lightning. "Hey," she whispered through the rain. "It's all right now." Slowly, miraculously, he stepped closer. The storm howled, but around them there was only stillness, as if the world itself were watching. He lowered his head until his forehead touched hers. Warm breath mingled with the scent of rain and blood and freedom. Her father stood behind her, soaked and speechless. "Lila," he said hoarsely. "I didn't know. I didn't see." She looked back, eyes fierce and full of something ancient. "He's not just a horse, Pa. He's a promise." Her father nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "Then we'll keep it." Thunder rolled again, softer this time, like applause from the heavens. By dawn, the storm had passed. The ranch was battered but still standing. The fields shimmered with new puddles, and the air smelled of clean earth. Ashwin stood in the corral, calm and bright, the morning light painting his coat gold. When Lila stepped up to the gate, he came without hesitation, pressing his muzzle against her good arm. Her father leaned on the fence, weary but smiling. "Guess he made his choice, huh?" She smiled back. "Guess we both did." The storm left behind a world washed clean. For the first time in months, sunlight spilled across Sage Creek. The air carried that rare scent of renewal, the smell of wet earth and hope. The fences were broken, the barn roof needed patching, but the land itself felt alive again. Lila stood by the corral with her arm in a sling, watching Ashwin graze in the morning light. His mane glowed like burnished copper, his muscles sleek and strong beneath his coat. There was no sign of the storm's terror left in him, only calm, proud grace. Her father came up beside her, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed one to her. "Fence can wait," he said. "You earned a rest." She smiled faintly. So did he. Her father studied the stallion. "Never thought I'd see a Mustang like that stand still for anyone." "He doesn't stand still for me, Pa," she said softly. "He stands with me." He took a slow sip of his coffee, watching her. "You sound just like your mother." The words caught her by surprise. She turned, and for the first time in years, she saw not just the lines of age on his face, but the grief, deep, quiet, unspoken. "She would have liked him," she said. He nodded. She would have understood. For a long while, they stood in silence, just listening. The creak of the windmill, the murmur of the grass, and the steady sound of the Mustang breathing nearby. Finally, her father said, "I've been thinking about Rhett Calloway." Lila stiffened. "If he comes back..." "He won't," her father said. "Not after last night." He paused, his voice lower now. "But we both know word will spread. Others will come. Men with money and no sense of mercy." Lila looked at Ashwin. The stallion lifted his head, ears pricking as if he'd heard every word. "He doesn't belong behind a fence," she said. Her father met her eyes. "I know." The simple honesty in his voice nearly broke her. That afternoon, Lila saddled her mare, Juniper, and led Ashwin out of the corral. The wind was cool and dry, sweeping through the grasslands like a blessing. Her father watched from the porch. "You sure you know what you're doing?" She smiled sadly. "If I keep him, I'll lose him. If I let him go, maybe he'll remember me kindly." He nodded once. "Then go, before I change my mind." She rode out with Ashwin trotting alongside her, his movements effortless, his spirit humming with life. Together they crossed the open plains, following the trail that wound toward the high ridges where the wild herds roamed free. As they rode, Lila thought of all the moments that had brought them here. The fear in his eyes that first night, the 4 words she'd whispered that bridged the distance between species, the storm that tested them both. She realized now that what she'd built with Ashwin wasn't ownership. It was understanding. And understanding, she thought, was the rarest kind of freedom. They reached the ridge by sunset. Below them stretched miles of rolling land, golden under the dying light. The wind carried the sound of distant hooves, other Mustangs, wild and unbound, running through the valley. Ashwin's ears flicked forward. His body tensed, not in fear, but in recognition. Lila dismounted and slipped the rope from his neck. He turned to her, eyes dark and endless, waiting. "This is your home," she whispered. "Go." But he didn't move. She stepped closer, brushing her hand down his face. "You're not my enemy," she said again, the same 4 words that had changed everything. "You never were." The stallion breathed out slowly, the sound deep and soft like a sigh. Then he did something she didn't expect. He leaned his forehead against her shoulder and stayed there. A heartbeat passed, then another. The warmth of him pressed through her, steady and alive. And then, he was gone. Ashwin turned and galloped down the ridge, mane flying, hooves drumming against the earth like thunder reborn. Lila watched until he vanished into the blaze of sunset, a streak of fire and light joining the herd that swallowed him whole. She stood there for a long time, tears running freely down her face. Not of sorrow, but of something fierce and bright. Behind her, the wind whispered through the sage. It carried voices, echoes of her mother, of her father, of the land itself, saying that sometimes love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go. When Lila returned to the ranch, the night was quiet. Her father sat on the porch, pipe in hand, eyes soft. "He's gone?" he asked. She nodded. "He's free." He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "So are you." She sank down beside him, resting her head on his shoulder. The stars were coming out, one by one, scattered like silver dust across the sky. "I keep thinking I'll hear him," she said. "That maybe he'll come back." Her father looked out over the dark horizon. "Maybe he will. Or maybe every time the wind blows through those hills, you'll hear him anyway." She smiled. "That's enough." Weeks passed, and the ranch began to heal. The grass grew taller after the rain, the fences were mended, and the herds fattened once more. Lila worked beside her father, quiet and steady, her arm healing with the land. Sometimes in the cool of the morning, she'd ride out alone toward the ridge. And sometimes, just as the sun broke over the horizon, she'd catch sight of a distant shape on the hill, a flash of silver and gold, a mane tossed by the wind. He never came close, but he never vanished completely either. It was as if he was watching, keeping a promise of his own. Lila would lift her hand in the air, heart full to bursting, and whisper into the dawn, "Run free, Ashwind." And far off, the Mustang would rear, hooves slicing through sunlight, before disappearing again into the wild. The people of Sage Creek still tell stories about the ghost horse who could never be caught, and the girl who spoke the language of the wind. Some say they still see him at twilight, standing on the ridge, mane glowing in the setting sun. But those who know Lila McCall know the truth. He wasn't a ghost. He was freedom given form. And all it took to save him were just 4 words. "You're not my enemy." The end.